What's up, guys? So today I'm gonna be talking about this little quote that I heard, and this was from Mike Tyson's trainer, and apparently it went something like this: "There's no difference between the coward and the hero," and what it implies is that there's no difference in terms of fear. Both the coward and the hero, they both have the same amount of fear. The difference is that the hero takes that fear and still acts on it and keeps going. And I think this applies to girls quite a lot. When you're approaching a girl, or I guess if a girl wants to initiate something with a man, I mean, again, nowadays with feminism, that is an option. Um, I I feel like there's a lot of those instances where logically I know like the fear is not going to go away. Like to a certain extent I can quell it to a certain degree through logical reasoning. And that is the magic of this whole process. It's realizing logically that the worst that can happen isn't that bad. Like you'll just get embarrassed, you'll leave. Maybe you'll see her again a few more times. Maybe some people around you might make fun of you if you do it. Um, but logically, you can reason to yourself that it's not going to really matter. And then, for me at least, there's a lot of those instances where it's just like the fear is gonna be there, and I'm still going to have to act. And I think that's a big misconception in the world. It's like the hero never feels any fear, and he's just constantly going at it, and that's what makes him different from the the coward. And if that were true, then there wouldn't be there shouldn't be as much renown for the hero, because it's in his biology to do such a thing. um, and in those cases it's something where it can be life and death, but he does it anyway for the greater good and thus becomes the hero. Whereas now it's like the cons and the dangers are not nearly as bad as being eaten by a lion or being killed at war. And so that therein lies the true difference. The hero feels the fear, but he continues on anyways, and that's what makes a true hero. Um, and That's the big difference. Like the coward feels the fear, but he saves his own skin first, or he stays in his comfort zone. And for me, I think this applies tremendously, because there are a lot of those instances where I had the choice whether to stay in my comfort zone, um, or go for it. And there were times when I would just hover around the area for half an hour, maybe even an hour, um, trying to sort of convince myself logically that it doesn't matter, just approach. And I realized that the fear was not going to go away. Um, I had gotten to a level where I could not quell this fear any longer. It would stay at this level. You could call it anxiety, if you will, and it would just continue on and on. And so I decided I'm fed up with all the missed opportunities. And after a lot of practice, I eventually went out there and did it. And I'm not gonna lie, a lot of times it didn't go well, but I was very surprised at how quickly I forgot about it, quite honestly. And sometimes, I'm astonished as to how I can barely remember what they looked like or what type of hair they had afterwards. And it's really not that bad. And it's like I remember moments when it seemed very devastating, but then that night when I'm like playing video games, I'm like, wow, I completely forgot about this. And I mean, it's never easy. There's always times where it sometimes creeps back, but it gets easier. And there's this one story where I mentioned before in another video, but it was when I was first starting out doing this. And no, I'm not some master guru or expert who's achieved everything now. I'm still sort of in the journey trying to figure things out. But this was a couple years ago, and I I approached a girl at the mall who was like seemed like late 20s. She had blonde hair, and I couldn't say. Looking back, it wasn't that bad. I wasn't confident, but I went up and approached, and I wasn't too exorbitantly nervous. And the girl just like immediately reacted to me, and she gave the sort of polite sort of rejection response where she's like, "Sorry, I gotta go," and then she left. When she was sitting down eating her lunch, when I went up to talk to her, so I was a little bit crushed, but immediately afterwards, this guy who was also sitting there eating his lunch, probably late 20s, early 30s. He was in like a collared shirt with a tie, and on his computer, he was just like, he said he saw that, and he was like, "Who are you? You gotta tell me what's going on." And he was just amazed by it. I couldn't even describe it. And he asked me these questions like what, and I just told him, briefly what I knew. But I elaborate more in depth in that other video on the topic. And then yeah, if you guys want to see that video, it's going to be uploaded soon, probably right after this one. And on top of this, I do want to get it out there that there are people who are genuinely confident. To say that there's no people who are not, or are in some way have fear. Let me rephrase that. To say that there are people who have no fear, that's a true statement. There are people who are literally just confident with girls, and they have either very little anxiety or they just have no anxiety. And this comes from a lot of factors and from the definition of confidence in itself. And to get to this state, you really have to have a lot of assuredness in yourself and a lot of belief in yourself. And it comes from knowing who you are and accepting it, and improving yourself to a state where you know girls are gonna like you. So the one guy I'm thinking of, he works out a lot, and he has a stellar personality. And he constantly says this, which amazes me. He says like he knows he's not the best looking guy at all, but he takes care of his body. He dresses well. He does what he can. He has a tremendously funny and cocky personality, and it just works for him. And I think if like the only warning I'm going to give you guys is to not fall into this rat race, because there are people who they chase like physical perfection to a point where they're never satisfied, and because of that, no matter how good looking they are, it's kind of like anorexia. They keep thinking that they're not that good looking, and then they just keep going, and they're always self-conscious. So at a certain point, you have to accept who you are and realize that you're good enough. And working out and getting muscles and a fit body is tough work, but it is another way of doing it, and that is that sort of natural sort of confidence, which does exist. I mean, there are people out there who they don't feel fear when they're talking to girls because they are just so confident in their looks or the way they're dressed or whatever, that they know there's attraction there. And there's so many other factors too. Like some of these guys, they also know that rejection isn't that big a problem. They just move on to the next girl immediately after. So that's another reason why they don't feel fear. That's all I gotta say. As always, like, favorite, comment, and subscribe.